Fred Astaire told Michael Jackson to learn ballet as a joke. What Michael did in secret for 2 years created the greatest dance move in history. It was March 1980, and Michael Jackson was 21 years old. He'd just finished filming a guest appearance on a television special, and the producers had arranged something Michael had dreamed about since childhood: a private meeting with Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire was 79 years old. His dancing days were mostly behind him, but his legacy towered over Hollywood like a monument. Gene Kelly, Gregory Hines, Sammy Davis Jr., every dancer of the 20th century existed in Fred Astaire's shadow. He'd made dancing in films an art form. He'd set standards that most people believed could never be matched. They met in a rehearsal studio at NBC in Burbank. Michael arrived early, nervous in a way he rarely felt. He'd performed for presidents and queens, but Fred Astaire was different. Fred was the standard. Fred was the dream. When Fred walked into the studio, Michael stood immediately. Fred moved slowly now, age evident in his careful steps, but his posture was still perfect. Dancer's posture. The kind of alignment that becomes permanent after decades of discipline. "Mr. Astaire," Michael said, his voice soft and respectful. "It's an honor, sir." "Fred," the older man corrected, extending his hand. "Please, Mr. Astaire was my father, and he wasn't nearly as good a dancer." They shook hands. Fred's grip was still strong despite his age. "I've watched all your films," Michael said. "Top Hat, Swing Time, The Bandwagon. I've studied every step." Fred smiled, gesturing to the chairs against the mirrored wall. "Sit, sit. My knees don't like standing for long conversations anymore. That's what happens when you spend 60 years jumping around in front of cameras." They sat. Michael noticed Fred studying him with the focused attention of someone who'd spent a lifetime evaluating movement. It made Michael self-conscious, aware of how he was sitting, how he held his shoulders. "You're good," Fred said without preamble. "I've seen you perform. The Jackson 5 stuff, your solo work. You've got natural rhythm, natural timing. That's something you can't teach." Michael felt pride warm his chest. "Thank you, sir. That means everything coming from you." "But," Fred continued, his tone shifting slightly, "you're relying entirely on natural talent. All instinct, no foundation." The pride in Michael's chest cooled. Foundation. "Classical training," Fred explained. "Ballet, jazz, modern. The technical foundation that lets you do anything. Right now you're dancing from feeling. That's beautiful, don't get me wrong. But feeling alone has limits. Eventually your body will want to do something your technique can't support." Michael absorbed this quietly. He'd never taken formal dance classes. Everything he knew, he'd learned from watching, imitating, feeling the music in his body and letting it move him. It had always been enough, more than enough. He was already famous for his dancing. "I danced from feeling for 20 years, Fred continued. "I was good, really good, but I stayed good. I didn't become great until I spent 2 years studying ballet, classical technique. That's when I learned how the body actually works. That's when I stopped being a talented kid and became an artist." Michael leaned forward slightly, interested despite the criticism. "You studied ballet, but your style doesn't look like ballet." "Exactly," Fred said, a slight smile playing at his lips. "That's the point. You learn the rules so you can break them beautifully. You build the foundation so the building can stand while you do crazy things on the upper floors. Right now you're building on sand, talented sand, but sand nonetheless." There was a pause. Michael wanted to defend himself, to list his accomplishments, to prove he was already great. But something stopped him. Maybe it was respect for Fred. Maybe it was the uncomfortable recognition that Fred might be right. "What should I do?" Michael asked quietly. Fred studied him for a long moment, then he chuckled, shaking his head. "You want my honest advice? Try ballet. Really try it. Take real classes with a real teacher, not for a week or a month, for years. See if you can handle the discipline." The way Fred said it, there was something dismissive in his tone. Not cruel, but not entirely encouraging either. It was the tone of someone who'd seen many talented dancers fail to commit to real training. "You think I can't handle it?" Michael asked, hearing the challenge in Fred's words. "I think you're used to things coming easy," Fred said bluntly. "Natural talent is a gift, but it's also a curse. When things come easy, you never learn to work, And ballet, Michael, ballet will break you. It broke me for 6 months before I started to understand it. You might have rhythm, but ballet doesn't care about rhythm. It cares about control, position, strength, flexibility. It will tear apart everything you think you know about dancing and rebuild it from scratch. Fred stood up slowly, using the bar on the wall for support. But hey, maybe you'll surprise me. Maybe you'll actually do it. Most dancers I tell this to nod and smile and never follow through. They're too comfortable with what they already know. Michael stood as well. Something in Fred's words had lit a fire in his chest. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more focused, more determined. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Astaire," Michael said formally. "Fred," the older man corrected again. "And you're welcome, kid. You've got something special. I just hope you don't waste it staying comfortable." They shook hands again. As Fred walked slowly toward the door, he paused and looked back. "Oh, and Michael, if you do take ballet seriously, call me in a couple years. I'd love to see what you do with it, assuming you stick with it, which I doubt you will." That last sentence, delivered with a slight smile, landed like a punch. "I doubt you will," not said cruelly, said like a fact. Like Fred had already decided Michael wasn't serious enough, wasn't dedicated enough, wasn't disciplined enough to do the hard work. Michael watched Fred leave. The door closed with a soft click. Michael stood alone in the rehearsal studio, his reflection staring back at him from the mirrored walls. He looked at himself. Really looked, trying to see what Fred saw. Natural talent, instinct, but no foundation. "I doubt you will." 2 days later, Michael made a phone call. He was discreet about it, using a connection through his mother's friend who knew someone in the ballet world. He wasn't ready to make this public. If Fred was right, if ballet really would break him, he didn't want anyone to know he'd tried and failed. The teacher's name was Madame Sophia Herrmann. She was 62 years old, a former principal dancer with American Ballet Theater. She'd retired from performing 20 years ago and now taught privately, working with serious students who could afford her fees and meet her standards. When Michael called, he didn't introduce himself as Michael Jackson. He used his middle name. "This is Michael Joseph. I was told you might have time for a private student." "I'm very selective," Madame Herrmann said, her accent still carrying traces of her Russian heritage. "What's your dance background?" "Self-taught," Michael admitted. "Natural ability but no formal training. I want to build a foundation." There was a long pause. Self-taught students are the hardest. You have to unlearn bad habits before learning correct technique. It's painful. Most quit within a month. "I won't quit," Michael said. "They all say that," Madame Herrmann replied dryly. "First lesson is Tuesday, 6 a.m. My studio in Beverly Hills. Don't be late. Ballet doesn't forgive tardiness." Michael showed up at 5:45 a.m. The studio was small, elegant, all hardwood floors and mirrored walls and bars running the length of the room. Madame Herrmann was already there, dressed in black teaching attire, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked at Michael, recognition flickering in her eyes. "You're that singer boy, Jackson." "Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to teach me, not treat me like I'm famous." Madame Herrmann considered this. Then she nodded once. "Good answer. Fame means nothing in this room. In here, you're a beginner. Possibly the oldest beginner I've ever taught. We start with basics. You'll spend the first month learning how to stand properly." She wasn't joking. That first session, they worked only on first position. How to turn out the hips, how to align the spine, how to distribute weight across the foot. Michael, who could spin and jump and move in ways that thrilled audiences, stood at a bar learning how to simply stand. It was humiliating, it was boring, it was excruciating. Michael loved it. He came back Tuesday, then Thursday, then Saturday. Madame Herrmann had him on a 3-day-per-week schedule, early mornings before the rest of Los Angeles woke up. No one knew, not his brothers, not his manager, not the media, just Michael and Madame Herrmann and the discipline of classical ballet. The first month was torture. Michael's body, trained for pop dancing, rebelled against ballet's demands. His turnout was weak. His extension was limited. His feet, so quick and light in his natural style, felt heavy and clumsy in ballet shoes. "You're too tense," Madame Herrmann would say, walking around him, correcting his arm position. Ballet requires control, yes, but also release. You're fighting your own body. I'm trying, Michael would say through gritted teeth, holding a releve that made his calves scream. Trying is not the same as doing, she'd reply. Again. 3 months in, Michael considered quitting. His schedule was brutal. Recording sessions, meetings, performances, then showing up at Madame Herrmann's studio at 6 a.m., exhausted, to be told his tendu was sloppy. It would be so easy to just stop. Fred had been right. Ballet was breaking him. But then he remembered Fred's voice. I doubt you will. Michael kept showing up. 6 months in, something shifted. Michael was working on a combination, pirouettes into an arabesque. He'd been struggling with the turn, either spinning too fast and losing control or too slow and losing momentum. But this time, his body understood. The preparation, the spot, the landing, all flowed together naturally. He completed the combination and stopped, breathing hard, staring at himself in the mirror. Good, Madame Herrmann said. It was the first time she'd said that word without qualification. Not good, but. Not good, however. Just good. Michael felt something in his chest expand. Pride, yes, but also understanding. He was starting to see what Fred had meant about foundation. All this work on alignment, on turnout, on control, it was building something underneath his natural ability. It was giving him new possibilities. 1 year in, Michael started experimenting. He'd take ballet technique and try to apply it to his pop dancing. The core strength from ballet let him isolate movements in new ways. The balance work let him hold positions that should have been impossible. The footwork, those endless hours of tendus and frappes, gave his feet a precision and speed he'd never had before. One morning, he was fooling around in the studio after class, trying to glide backward. He'd seen a dancer named Jeffrey Daniel do something similar, a moonwalk sort of move. Michael tried to recreate it, using his new ballet training. The core control to keep his torso still, the turnout to angle his feet correctly, the quick, precise footwork he'd developed through ballet technique. He pushed back with one foot while sliding the other. The movement was smooth, but not quite right. He tried again. Again. On the 4th attempt, something clicked. The glide was seamless. He looked like he was walking forward but moving backward. It was an illusion, a beautiful optical trick created through precise technical control. What are you doing? Madame Herrmann asked from the door. Michael stopped, embarrassed to be caught fooling around. Just playing, trying to figure something out. She walked closer, studying him. Do it again. Michael demonstrated the move, the backward glide. Interesting, she said. That's good turnout work. The illusion works because your core is completely stable while your feet create the motion. That's ballet technique. You've finally started understanding how to use what I've taught you. Michael practiced that move obsessively, in his hotel rooms on tour, in recording studio breaks, in his bedroom late at night. The basic technique was there, but he wanted to perfect it, make it smoother, more impossible looking, more magical. 2 years after meeting Fred Astaire, Michael got a call. He was being asked to perform on the Motown 25 television special. It would be a tribute to his early career, performing with his brothers, but also a chance to showcase his solo work. Michael knew immediately what he wanted to do. This would be the moment, the reveal, the proof. Rehearsals for Motown 25 were intense. Michael worked with his brothers on the Jackson 5 medley, but he'd also negotiated time for a solo performance of Billie Jean. During those solo rehearsals, he was secretive about what he was planning. The producers knew he'd be dancing, but they didn't know exactly what he had prepared. March 25th, 1983. The Motown 25 special was being taped at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. Michael performed the Jackson 5 medley with his brothers, energetic and nostalgic. Then came his moment. He walked back onto the stage alone, wearing a black sequin jacket and a single white glove. I have to say those were the good old days, Michael said to the audience. I love those songs. Those were magic moments with all my brothers, including Jermaine. But what I really like are the new songs. The opening notes of Billie Jean started. Michael began to move. For the first 3 minutes, he danced with his signature style. Spins, kicks, the energy and charisma that had always been there. The audience was enjoying it, but they'd seen this before. Then Michael stopped. He paused. And he did something no one had seen him do before. He floated backward, the moonwalk. Smooth as silk, impossible looking. Michael gliding backward across the stage while appearing to walk forward. The audience gasped. Some people stood up, not believing what they were seeing. Michael did it again, longer, more pronounced. Then he spun, froze on his toes, a perfect releve, holding the position with the kind of control that came from 2 years of dawn ballet classes. The performance ended. The audience erupted. They knew they'd just witnessed something historic, something that would be replayed forever. 2,000 miles away in Los Angeles, Fred Astaire sat in his living room watching the broadcast. His wife, Robin, sat beside him. When Michael did the moonwalk, Fred leaned forward in his chair. "Did you see that?" he said quietly. "It's incredible," Robin replied. Fred watched the rest of the performance in silence. When it ended, he continued staring at the screen even though they'd cut to commercial. Robin looked at her husband and saw something she rarely saw, tears in his eyes. "Fred," she said gently. "That boy," Fred said, his voice thick. "I told him to study ballet. I didn't think he'd actually do it, and he didn't just do it. He mastered it. Did you see that control, that balance? That's 2 years of serious training, maybe more. He took what I said seriously." Fred stood up slowly and walked to the phone. Robin watched as he dialed, his hands shaking slightly. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered at Michael's management office. Fred identified himself and asked for Michael's private number. After some verification, they gave it to him. Fred called. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then Michael's soft voice answered. "Hello? Michael, this is Fred Astaire." There was a pause. "Mr. Astaire, did you watch?" "I did," Fred said. "Michael, I need to tell you something. I was wrong." "Wrong about what?" "I told you ballet would break you. I said I doubted you'd stick with it. I was wrong. What you did tonight, that wasn't just good dancing. That was art. That was taking everything I spent my life doing and pushing it forward. You didn't just meet my challenge. You surpassed it." Michael was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was emotional. "I did it for you. After we talked, I found a teacher. I trained for 2 years. I wanted to show you that I could do the work." "You did more than that," Fred said. "You've created something new. That moonwalk, whatever you call it, that's going to be remembered forever. And it exists because you had the discipline to build the foundation. You proved me wrong, Michael. You proved you're not just talented. You're dedicated. You're serious. You're the real thing." Fred heard Michael breathing on the other end of the line, heard the emotion he was holding back. "Thank you," Michael said quietly. "That means everything. You're my hero, Mr. Astaire." "Fred," the older man corrected gently, "and you're not my student anymore. You're my peer. You've earned that. What you did tonight, that's going to influence generations of dancers, just like I did. The torch doesn't just pass, Michael. It gets brighter, and you made it shine tonight." They talked for 20 more minutes, Fred asking about the training, about the technique, about how Michael had developed the move. Michael explaining the ballet work, the experimentation, the hundreds of hours of practice. 2 dancers separated by 5 decades, connecting over their shared dedication to the craft. After they hung up, Fred sat back down next to Robin. "That boy's going to change everything," he said. Fred was right. The Motown 25 performance became iconic. The moonwalk became Michael's signature. Everyone tried to copy it. Everyone failed because they saw the move but didn't understand the foundation. They didn't know about the 2 years of ballet, the early morning classes, the discipline, the dedication to building technique that could support the impossible. Michael never stopped training. Even as Thriller made him the biggest star on earth, he continued working with dance teachers. He continued developing new moves, always built on that classical foundation Fred had challenged him to acquire. In 1987, Fred Astaire passed away at age 88. Michael was devastated. He released a statement. "Fred Astaire was my hero. He challenged me to be better, to work harder, to never be satisfied with natural talent alone. Everything I've achieved in dance, I owe to his words. He told me to try ballet. That challenge changed my life." Years later, dance historians would analyze Michael's technique. They'd notice the ballet influence, the classical foundation underlying his pop style, The way he could hold perfect positions, the way his core never wavered no matter how wild his arms and legs moved. The control that looked like magic but was actually the result of rigorous training. The moonwalk itself became the most imitated dance move in history. But very few people could do it with Michael's smoothness, his control, his apparent effortlessness. Because very few people knew the secret. It wasn't just about moving your feet backward, it was about the foundation, the classical technique that made the impossible look easy. Madame Sophia Herrmann continued teaching until her death in 2005. In an interview late in life, she was asked about teaching Michael Jackson. "He was the most dedicated student I ever had," she said. "He came to me as a pop star who could have rested on his talent. He left as an artist who understood that real greatness requires work. That moonwalk everyone loves, that's 2 years of 6 a.m. ballet classes. That's hundreds of relevés and tendus and pliés. That's the result of someone taking a challenge seriously." Today, every dancer who performs the moonwalk, every performer who tries to replicate Michael's technique, they're all benefiting from a joke Fred Astaire made in 1980. A challenge issued to a talented kid who Fred doubted would follow through. But Michael did follow through. He took the joke seriously. He spent 2 years building a foundation in secret. And when he revealed what he'd created, it changed dance forever. The greatest dance move in history exists because of a joke, because a legend challenged a young star, and because that young star had the dedication to prove the legend wrong. Fred Astaire told Michael Jackson to try ballet. Michael didn't just try it, he mastered it. And in doing so, he created magic that will outlive them both.